Hello learners, welcome to today's class. Welcome to Biology with Omotayo. We'll be continuing with the series we started 2 classes ago. Remember, presently we are looking at the classification of living things. And under this very modern topic, the first class we looked at nomenclature, that is binomial nomenclature, and basics of classification of living things. We examined the hierarchical system that was introduced by Calvin Line, also being referred to as Carolus Linnaeus, and who is known as the father of nomenclature. He is known as the father of classification. Okay. Afterward, we had another class, and that class dealt more with basic concepts surrounding the classification of living things. We looked at the 2 systems of classification, which was introduced by Calvin Line, or also called Carolus Linnaeus. And then we also looked at the 5 systems of classification, which was introduced by R.H. Whitaker in the year 1969. This became necessary because of the shortfalls that were associated with the earlier 2 systems of classification that was introduced by Carl Linnaeus, or Calvin Line, as you may choose to call him. So now, today, we will continue with kingdoms of living organisms. However, we will start examining each of the kingdoms. We will be starting with Kingdom Monera. Remember from last class, the 5 system of classification introduced by Whitaker was outlined on the board. We had a chart, the 5 were listed, and a couple of characters that makes each unique were identified. We equally learned to rhyme the 5 kingdoms. So I will take it again, and if you are joining us for the first time, you will learn it as well. For those who were in the last class, you simply join me. Okay, so I take the rhyme again for the 5 kingdoms of classification introduced by R.H. Whitaker. We have them as Monera, Kingdom Monera, Proctotista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Again, Monera, Proctotista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. Monera, Proctotista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. Monera, Proctotista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. Thank you for joining me. Now, so that was where we paused last class. For today, we'll be looking at Kingdom Monera. We'll be looking at organisms that were classified under Kingdom Monera and why. What are their unique characteristics? And in fact, before leaving that very kingdom, we'll take a diagram of one of the members of this kingdom to see a couple of components that makes up these organisms that were grouped under the Kingdom Monera. So we are having A. From last class, we learned that members of Kingdom Monera are prokaryotes. That is, they are organisms that do not have a true nucleus. They have no well-formed nucleus. They only have a couple of genetic materials that help to transmit character from one generation to the other. So, firstly, we'll be having a unique character for them. 1, it is a kingdom that contains prokaryotes. Okay. Secondly, they are unicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms are organisms that exist as a single cell. A single cell carries out all functions of life and is able to do that perfectly, just like multicellular will do. Okay, so afterwards we'll be looking at another character, and that is they do not contain complex organelles. Remember, from our previous lessons, we learned that organelles are the structural and the functional units of a cell, just as the cell is the structural and functional unit of life. So for members of Kingdom Monera, they have just simple organelles. These organelles are not membrane-bound organelles. They lack organelles such as mitochondria, such as the chloroplast, such as the nucleus, and so on and so forth. Yes, such as the nucleus. Remember earlier, we said they only contain strands of genetic material. The strands are not collected together in an enclosure, no nuclear membrane, okay, and so there is no well differentiated nuclear component, just genetic strands. Next, members of this group do not reproduce sexually. Okay, so they do not reproduce sexually. Next, members of this group, the cell wall do not contain cellulose, polysaccharide, and amino acid. And then lastly, members of this group, they may be photosynthetic, that is to say they have the ability to produce their own food, okay, which means they may be autotrophs, organisms that have the ability to produce their own food, or they may be heterotrophs, organisms that depend on ready-made food. So these are a few of unique characters that differentiates this group from other groups. And so, like I pointed out much earlier, members of Kingdom Monera can be grouped into a couple of subs, and from these subs we have examples. Okay, the most unique of the example of organism under the Kingdom Monera is the bacteria. So I'll quickly illustrate the diagram of the bacteria, and we'll see a bit of the components that makes up this unicellular prokaryotic organism called the bacteria. Okay, class, as you can see here, I'm having the diagram of a bacteria, and some of its components are okay. So some of its components, we have the flagellum, which means this is a motile bacteria, has the capability to move. Sometimes the flagellum may not be there, okay, but for this very one that I've made drawn, it has a flagellum, which is an organelle for mobility. And then we have the capsule, the cell wall, the cell membrane, and then we have DNA strand, okay. DNA strand, the full, that word DNA simply means deoxyribonucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the form in which genetic material is being carried in cells. And then we have a cytoplasm. Remember from earlier lessons as well, when we were examining cells, we said it is in the cytoplasm that all the organelles of a unicellular organism is suspended, or other organelles of a cell, be it plant or animal cell, other organelles of the said cell are suspended in the cytoplasm. So this is a picture of what a bacteria looks like. With this, we'll be moving on to the next, that is Kingdom Protoctista. Come with me. Okay, so We'll be moving on to Kingdom Proctotista, and that will be B. In the course of our introduction in the previous class, I equally made it known that this kingdom can equally be referred to as Kingdom Protista. However, it is more accepted for it to be referred to as Kingdom Protoctista. And here, for Kingdom Proctotista, we have organisms with the following features. 1. Organisms here are regarded as being eukaryotic. That is, they are organisms with true nucleus. They have membrane-bound organelles. They have nuclear material or genetic material that are encased in well-formed nuclear membrane. Next, members of Kingdom Proctotista are equally unicellular organisms, just like we had it with members of Kingdom Monera, which means members of Kingdom Monera are prokaryotic unicellular organisms, while members of Kingdom Proctotista are eukaryotic unicellular organisms. Please take note, both kingdoms have unicellular organisms, but for Monera, they are prokaryotic, and for Protoctista, they are eukaryotic organisms. These organisms as well, majority have organelles for mobility. So they have organelles like cilia, flagellum, and in fact, some produce what is called a false foot, pseudopodia, and so on. So members of Kingdom Proctotista do have a couple of organelles that do aid their ability to move. Organelles such as the cilia, the flagellum, and then the pseudopodia. Now, quick one, members of this group, they have the ability to reproduce asexually using a process called binary fission, or what we equally call mitosis. Okay? They use a process called binary fission or mitosis. This will be further looked at in subsequent classes. When we say binary fission, we simply means ability of a cell to split into two. Okay, binary, two. Remember earlier when we were looking at the Kingdom Monera as well, we said members of that kingdom cannot reproduce sexually. They can only reproduce asexually. The mode of asexual reproduction also for Kingdom Monera is binary fission. It is the same mode for Kingdom Monera and Proctotista. However, for Proctotista, some of the members under Proctotista have the ability to reproduce sexually. This is done by what is called fusion of gametes. In one of our previous classes, we discussed a term called conjugation. And in that very class, we said conjugation is the simplest form of sexual reproduction. So for members of Kingdom Proctotista, some have the ability to reproduce sexually through fusion of gametes. Okay, through fusion of gametes. Now, members of this group or members of this kingdom may also be autotropic or heterotropic. Okay, members of this group may be autotropic or heterotropic. That is to say, they have the ability to either produce their own food or depend on ready-made food. Now we'll be looking at a few examples of organisms that can be grouped or that are grouped under Kingdom Proctotista. And a quick one, remember earlier from previous class when we drew the charts showing the 5 kingdoms, we said for Kingdom Proctotista, we have the animal-like forms of organism that are under it being referred to as Protozoa, and the plant-like form of organisms under Prototista being referred to as Protophyta. Okay? We'll now be looking at a few named organisms under this kingdom. Okay, now as I said, we'll be looking at a few organisms that are being grouped under this Kingdom Proctotista. Remember, I equally said the protozoans are animal-like and the Protophyta, they are plant-like. Now to start with, we'll be starting with the sub under this kingdom. The first sub, remember, under our hierarchical system, after a kingdom, what you have next is a phylum. So the first sub I'll be discussing is phylum Protozoa. Phylum Protozoa. This is a phylum or a sub under Kingdom Proctotista that have organisms that are animal-like. Organisms such as organisms such as the amoeba, a shapeless organism. We learned that long ago from our elementary classes. Varicella, Paramecium, trypanosome, Treponema pallidum, that causes syphilis, plasmodium, the pathogen that causes malaria. So these are a few of the organisms that are grouped under phylum Protozoa under the very Kingdom Proctotista. I'll quickly illustrate the diagram for one of these. Okay, so class, this is the diagram of one of the member of phylum Protozoa. This is a Paramecium. This is a Paramecium. And as you can see, it is a unicellular organism that carries out all necessities of life, living just as a single cell. In fact, the Paramecium is often nicknamed as a slippers-shaped organism. So take note, peradventure you are asked, just like the amoeba is a shapeless organism, in same vein, we have a slippers-shaped organism, and it is called the Paramecium. Also, uniquely, this is one of the known organisms that has more than one nucleus. That is to say, it has 2 nuclei. Yes, the Paramecium has 2 nuclei. Yes, and I will call your attention to that even as I try to label. So come along with me and let us try to label this diagram. As you can see here, we have a micronucleus. And then we have a macronucleus. Okay, we have the cilium here, singular cilium, which aids movement. If I have touched more than one, I will not say cilium, I will rather say cilia. Okay, and here is a contractile vacuole. A replica of it is also here. So for the Paramecium, it has the posterior and the anterior contractile vacuole. And then a food vacuole, as you can see, several of them. Cytoplasm, that is the inner part of our cell containing suspension of other organelles. This is a new food vacuole forming. Why? Because this is the oral groove through which the paramecium takes in its food. The oral groove is like saying the mouth of the organism. So paramecium is a heterotrophic organism. It feeds on ready-made food. So that's the oral groove. And directly under the pellicule, which is like a cell wall, this is the pellicule. Under this pellicule, we have dot-like organelles. Dot-like organelles known as trichocysts. These organelles are responsible for secreting special secretion with which the paramecium can sting its prey and then feed as a predator. Several other components of the paramecium can be labeled, but I believe this will do for now. And this will now lead us quickly to other members under this Kingdom Proctotista. We quickly look at other phylum. We still have 3 other phylum under this Kingdom Proctotista. So we'll be looking at the 3 other phylum. The first phylum we looked at was phylum Protozoa. So we'll move to phylum Euglena. Next, we'll be looking at phylum Chrysophyta. And then lastly, we'll be looking at phylum Pyrophyta. These 3 forms our Protophyta, plant-like. Remember, I discussed this as animal-like. You can see these 3 all have the phyta. So they belong to the ones grouped as being plant-like. And a prominent member here is the Euglena. From phylum Euglenophyta, we have organisms like the Euglena. Also a controversial organism. Yes, Euglena, a controversial organism, because it has both plant and animal character, which means at times it can be photosynthetic in nature, feeding like autotrophs do. At other time, it may choose, depending on circumstances surrounding it, to live as an heterotroph, as the case may be. And then for phylum Chrysophyta, we have examples like the diatom, okay, and so on, the zooplanktons and so on, the phytoplanktons and so on. And then for phylum Pyrophyta, we have examples like our dinoflagellates, among others. Learners, thank you for staying this far with the class. This will be bringing us to the end of the class for today. When we meet next class, we will continue from here. We've been able to examine Kingdom Monera and Kingdom Proctotista. Both kingdoms have unicellular organisms. However, for Monera, they are prokaryotic unicellular. And for Proctotista, they are eukaryotic unicellular organism. Take care. Please kindly subscribe to this channel, share to your friends, and encourage them to subscribe as well. Always endeavor to like the various lessons as well. All this will encourage us to keep putting on effort to ensure we keep doing the good work. Thank you, and do have a great day. Take care. From the intricate working of the cells to classification of living things, from the mechanism